O Capítulo Regional PRME Brasil, o Escritório do PNUD Brasil, em colaboração com o Secretariado PRME, o Capítulo PRME DACH e os Grupos de Trabalho do PRME, e com o apoio do Comitê Brasileiro do Pacto Global da ONU, tenho o prazer em recebê-los na 4ª Conferência Pesquisa para Educação Executiva Responsável com o tema Novas questões para a pesquisa sobre como avançar na implementação dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável. O evento é uma iniciativa do PRME Global e o sistema Fiep é o patrocinador. O objetivo da conferência é criar um fórum para discutir como a comunidade de pesquisa de educação executiva, em colaboração com empresas, políticos, ONGs, juventude, mídia e outras partes interessadas do novo papel dos negócios da sociedade, também no desenvolvimento sustentável e na educação executiva responsável, poderia melhor apoiar as correntes iniciativas emblemáticas do Pacto Global, do PRME e da ONU, centrados no avanço dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável. Como deveria ser a nova agenda de pesquisa para contribuir efetivamente para a compreensão dos desafios e oportunidades relacionadas com a implementação dos ODS, e como o conhecimento e a compreensão recém-criados poderiam ser integrados em práticas de negócio e gestão, em políticas públicas e na educação executiva responsável, compreendendo que negócios e educação executiva responsável deverão desempenhar um papel importante na realização do ODS e considerando ainda os educadores de gestão como atores-chave no desenvolvimento de futuros líderes e no suporte à perseguição dos ODS, o PRME já está integrando os ODS em seus fluxos de trabalho com uma ênfase ainda maior nessa integração, especialmente por meio de uma maior contribuição na pesquisa. Senhoras e senhores, sejam todos muito bem-vindos. E para a saudação e abertura da 4ª Conferência Pesquisa para a Educação Executiva Responsável, convidamos as autoridades à frente e logo mais, às 11 horas, teremos a discussão da mesa redonda número 1 com as políticas públicas para a gestão responsável de educação e pesquisa. Portanto, para a abertura e saudação, convidamos à frente Norman Arruda Filho, presidente do PRME Chapter Brasil. José Antônio Vargas, superintendente do Censo do IEL no Paraná e diretor regional do SENAI no Paraná. Como pedido pelo Norman, ex-aluno do IFGT. Também convidamos à frente Lourdes Charles, PRME Chapter DACH. Também à frente, nosso convidado, o elenco Grupo de Trabalho PRME Anti-Pobreza. Cláudio Boechat, Grupo de Trabalho PRME Anti-Pobreza. E Jonas Vai, PRME Global. Nós vamos iniciar com a abertura e saudação, convidando José Antônio Vargas, superintendente do Censo do IEL no Paraná, também diretor regional do SENAI no Paraná.
Bom dia. Muito obrigado a vocês pela presença. Nós estamos muito felizes por ter a oportunidade de ser um parceiro desse movimento relevante para a nossa sociedade, para os nossos dias, para aquilo que entendemos possa ser um futuro melhor. Todas as autoridades, muito grato, parabéns, Norma, mais uma vez, a todos nós, todos os parceiros. Nós aqui do Sistema Federação das Indústrias, nós estamos muito preocupados com essa dinâmica da educação integral e com a relevância do valor humano no processo, né, de tentar construir a educação como uma prática de cidadania ativa que tenha efetivamente um valor sustentável. Nós estamos trabalhando fortemente com os ODS, estamos trabalhando muito em parceria com a ONU na área do trabalho de gêneros, que ainda é uma realidade difícil dentro das organizações. Temos trabalhado outras diversidades, outros tipos de minoria, trabalho do deficiente, tentando ambientá-lo definitivamente no mercado. Temos feito programas de graduação e pós-graduação enfatizando a sustentabilidade como uma ferramenta fundamental para a competitividade dos negócios. Esse é o nosso trabalho, essa é a nossa realidade, por isso nós estamos aqui, por isso nós somos parceiros desse movimento. Sejam, portanto, muito bem-vindos e tenham todos um bom evento. Muito obrigado.
Arruda Filho, presidente do PRME Chapter Brasil, por gentileza, a palavra é sua.
Bom dia aos integrantes de mesa, que não é mesa, é um festival de cadeiras. E eu gostaria de chamar a atenção de vocês para alguns pontos que são de fundamental importância e que, a meu ver, são extremamente significativos na realização deste evento sobre a coordenação do sistema Fiep. Esta casa, ela integra os dois pontos fundamentais que nós tivemos a oportunidade, nesses 2 últimos dias, de discutirmos e assistirmos uma série muito interessante de exemplos, sugestões, críticas, com esse olhar que o Fares coloca de uma maneira muito clara, tendo em vista o compromisso que está na agenda das instituições. E considerando que o sistema Fiep como um todo representa, de um lado, a presença muito clara de empresários, de outro lado, representa a educação, não apenas voltada a esses empresários, mas ao sistema como um todo, entendendo a educação como um fenômeno de desenvolvimento da sociedade. E quando nós trazemos esse evento para cá, sob a ótica de tudo que foi lido aqui, sobre os objetivos desse evento, como maximizar o efeito, a importância da atividade de pesquisa como forma de estimular o desenvolvimento de todo o conjunto dos ODS, das práticas de sustentabilidade, e seja em que nível for, aqui não há distinção entre a sustentabilidade sob a ótica educacional, sob a ótica empresarial, governamental, não governamental, enfim, é aquilo que falávamos ontem no encerramento do nosso evento, que diz respeito a um fenômeno muito claro, que é um fenômeno global, não é exclusivamente de um país que tem mais ou menos. Não. A urgência é global. E nós temos esse compromisso, que o Fares salientou de uma maneira muito clara, desse leque de ações e de iniciativas que tem como objetivo muito claro buscar de forma objetiva esse processo de desenvolvimento. Eu gostaria que esse evento só foi possível porque, e aqui eu gostaria de mencionar 3 pessoas que eu considero da maior importância, também meu amigo Milenko, que é um grande articulador deste movimento todo que nós estamos assistindo, do Lutz, do nosso grande... Eu posso esquecer teu nome? Não. Cláudio Boixá. Né? E o Cláudio também foi um grande maestro dessa articulação toda. Para que isso acontecesse, nós temos aqui, e é importante enfatizar, o trabalho da Adriana Calganda, dentro desse processo, onde ela assumiu, junto com o Flávio, ambos, USP São Paulo, né? e os de Ribeirão. Podia ser os de Ribeirinho, né? Porque o jeito que está faltando chuva lá não dá para ser Ribeirão, não é mesmo? Mas esses dois foram os grandes atores. Ó, manga arregaçada, fizeram, aconteceram, né? E se nós estamos aqui, vocês dois são co-partícipes desse processo e dessa dinâmica. Eu só tenho que dizer para vocês que eu confio muito nas ações que aqui serão discutidas, debatidas, trocadas e a capacidade de síntese para que a gente possa formular. E que o Jonas Hertel, que nos abrilhanta com a sua presença aqui e pela sua capacidade extremamente dinâmica de conduzir os processos no âmbito do PRME na própria ONU, não apenas nos 85 países onde esse movimento está presente, mas que eu acredito que o Jonas vai levar daqui, né, um volume muito grande de contribuições que possam efetivamente entrar na agenda do PRME. Eu acho que isso é um esforço coletivo de todos, né, e ressalta a importância da realização desse evento aqui no auditório do Sistema Fiep. Muito obrigado.
Lutz Chadwick, PRME Chapter DACH, por gentileza.
Please excuse me speaking in English to you. First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you for finding the way to this conference and to this wonderful venue here at Fiep in Curitiba. I'd like to welcome all guests, all speakers, all participants, and of course all our friends from Brazil and abroad. And I think it is important to see that, as Norman has said in his welcoming words, that this is a global movement. Responsible management education, in particular research on RME, is something that is being dealt with all over the globe. We all try to interconnect and develop a common mindset that will help us change the world for the better. And please let me just highlight briefly how this all came about. And I've prepared a little slide here just to give you an overview of history. That started in 2014 in Chur, Switzerland, which is my hometown. And we're a University of Applied Science, and we said this is going to be important to start something in the area of research. Combined with the second chapter meeting of PRME DACH, we started that first conference. And quickly we found that there were interests elsewhere. And we had some friends from the North African area that took over the relay and held the second conference in 2015, as you can see here, at the American University of Cairo. And since we like that idea of being in the DACH region, which is the German-speaking countries in particular, for PRME, and going abroad in the next year, we continued doing that. And I was so fond of meeting Claudio Boscia in Cairo at the time. He was running around looking at the pyramids, and by the way, he said, "We're going to do it in Brazil." Yeah. Are you okay? I said, "Wonderful, let's do it in Brazil." Curitiba, and I have Fiep. Wonderful. So we said, let's go. And in between, we had another DACH meeting and another conference on research on RME in France, Austria. So this is the DACH region, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, the German-speaking countries. And the year after, we had the opportunity to finally come here to Brazil and celebrate this fourth Responsible Management Education Research Conference. So as you can see, participating in this event for you is a highlight in your career, because this is going to grow into something very big. right now, I'm not telling the story onwards into the future because there is going to be a great future, obviously. This I will keep in suspense till tomorrow, when we will announce the next conference, which is certainly going to take place. And you may estimate it's going to be in the DACH region, which is true, but I'm not saying anymore. So thank you very much. Have a great conference, and thank you for your attention.
Senhoras e senhores, e agora com uma surpresa realmente agradável a todos que aqui se encontram, um presente nosso a vocês. Nós vamos ouvir o diretor do Earth Institute Columbia University, professor Jeffrey Sachs.
Good. It's really a pleasure to be with you, and I thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with PRIME. This is a very important initiative that you are involved in, and it links in many ways with the initiatives that I'm carrying out for the United Nations. So I would like to make the connection and to share some ideas with you. You are responsible for looking at business education and how it intersects with sustainable development. And in my capacity, I serve as special advisor to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and also as a director of a global network called the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, that is charged with supporting universities to take up the cause of sustainable development, and specifically the Sustainable Development Goals. So obviously PRIME and SDSN, as we call it, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, have a lot of work to do together. And I want to introduce a few of those key themes in the few minutes that we have together right now. The first is the issue of the Sustainable Development Goals themselves. I hope that most or maybe all of you are very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. But just to be sure, let me give a little bit of a context for you. The Sustainable Development Goals are part of the Agenda 2030, which was adopted in September 2015 by all 193 UN member states. It also incorporates the Paris Climate Agreement that was adopted by the same 193 member states in Paris in December 2015. Within Agenda 2030, which is an agenda for sustainable development, there are 17 sustainable development goals. And those 17 SDGs are the agreed priorities and the guiding metrics for global cooperation and development for the period 2015 to 2030. In this way, I believe they are essential for education because every student and new businessman and businesswoman should understand the context of global and local business, because every country is obliged to cooperate and to pursue policies for sustainable development. So it's worthwhile to just say one word about what is sustainable development. It means the combination of or the economic, social, Every student needs to understand the challenge of sustainable development, because this is now the global framework for business. The United Nations has adopted Agenda 2030. It includes 7 Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations has adopted the Paris Climate Agreement, which gives requirements for every country and for the world to move to a low-carbon energy system. And every business now has the responsibility to be coherent with the Sustainable Development Goals. I was saying, and I don't know when we dropped off, that sustainable development needs to be understood in its basic framework as promoting economic prosperity, social justice, and environmental sustainability. So this is what we need to teach our students most fundamentally, that it is the combination of economic, social, and environmental objectives. And the 17 Sustainable Development Goals express in those 17 goals the commitments in the economic, social, and environmental sphere. It's worth understanding just for a moment the background of these 17 goals. The concept of sustainable development was actually first adopted 25 years ago at the Rio Summit, right, Brazil, and grateful for that. At the Rio Earth Summit, 3 major treaties were adopted on climate change, fighting the spread of deserts, and protecting biodiversity. But when the governments came together 20 years later in 2012, again in Rio, and they took note of what had happened during the 20 years since the Rio Earth Summit, the news was quite bad, because those treaties had not been implemented. And the world was less sustainable in 2012 than it had been even in 1992. So this is when the government said we need to adopt clear goals, clear metrics, and a more public orientation to put sustainable development at the center of public awareness and of intergovernmental cooperation. The first thing I think is true is that all of our students should learn the Sustainable Development Goals. They should all be taught the Paris Climate Agreement. They should all study Agenda 2030, because this is the global framework that we are orienting during the period 2015 to 2030. And business obviously plays a fundamental role. Let me mention quickly 3 key dimensions of sustainable development. The first is energy transformation, to move from the high carbon energy system that uses coal, oil, gas, to the low carbon energy system that relies on solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and nuclear power. In other words, we have to stop emitting carbon dioxide into the air, which is warming the climate and leading to more destructive storms and rising sea levels, with the tragedy that we have just seen, for example, in the Caribbean this past week with Hurricane Irma. We must stop the global warming. That requires decarbonizing the energy system. A second great challenge is sustainable agriculture. Consider Brazil, where the Amazon basin continues to be under threat of deforestation, drying, loss of biodiversity because of the continued spread of cattle ranches and other agriculture and infrastructure into the rainforest. Well, this is happening all over the world, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in the Congo Basin, in the Amazon Basin, in many, many other places. And the big push that is leading to this kind of environmental degradation is agriculture. Because our agriculture practices, in the way they use land, in the way they use chemicals, in the way that they clear rainforests, in the way that they use scarce water resources, are not environmentally sustainable. So we need a transformation of the agroecological technologies and agribusiness for sustainability. A third area that is very important and important for business is sustainable cities, which is the goal number 11, that we need to rebuild and redesign our cities to be clean, to be low carbon emission, to be fair to the poor, to be productive and efficient in transportation, in communications, to be a pleasant place to live with low air and water pollution, low chemical pollutants, walking environment, and so on. So this is something we also need to teach to our business students, that these are going to be major business challenges in the energy sector, in the agriculture sector, in the urban environment. And remember that the world will add perhaps 3 billion people to the urban population between now and the middle of this century, because we're engaged in an historically rapid, unprecedented rise in urbanization just of this generation. And we have to plan our cities better, and that requires a lot of cooperation with the business community. Now, all of this, in my view, requires new kinds of teaching programs. Sustainable development education is inherently cross-disciplinary. To understand sustainable development, one needs to understand the physical earth systems, like climate or the water system, more than most students do. To understand sustainable development, one needs to understand engineering, at least to some extent. For example, the alternative choices in the kind of energy systems that we are using. One needs to understand public policy, for example, urban development, urban zoning, and such choices. And all of this means a kind of interdisciplinary teaching that is more complex than our normal curriculum, because students should be mastering some science, they should be mastering some engineering, and they should be mastering some public policy. And most of our students do not gain expertise across that range of activities. Now, to help on this, I've been part of 2 initiatives that I want to mention to you. One is a consortium of about 40 universities around the world teaching a master's degree in sustainable development. And I could help any school that's interested with the curriculum and how we design that interdisciplinary teaching program. The second initiative is what we call the SDG Academy. This is an online repository of university courses that are freely available in different facets of sustainable development. I have an overview course that's been watched by hundreds of thousands of students, I'm happy to say, called The Age of Sustainable Development. There are special courses in public health, in oceans, in early childhood development, and in other dimensions of sustainable development, in energy systems, This week, we launch a free online course in macroeconomics. So this is perhaps helpful for many of your schools in introducing a kind of e-textbook that can be freely used by students to study sustainable development. From the point of view of business education, I think there's another dimension that is extremely important. Students should first learn about sustainable development. Second, they should learn about Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. Third, they should learn the details about, as I mentioned, climate, energy, agriculture, urban development. But in addition, they should learn about business practices for sustainable development. For example, all over the world, businesses are now being asked or required to report on their sustainable development activities. And of course, most businesses now have a vice president of sustainability and issue an annual sustainable development report. I think our students need to learn about that. What is the content? How to report on sustainable development? What are the metrics? What are the choices involved? And this is good training for the labor market because there will be a big demand for such expertise. A second kind of education is about what is, you know, as, or we call in English, ESG investing, meaning economic, social, and governance investing. There are now an estimated $20 trillion of assets that are under management based on ESG principles. That is, that businesses' challenges of energy, pollution, smart cities, sustainable agriculture by business alone, or by government alone, or by civic action alone. This is a multi-stakeholder process. There is a partnership challenge involved, and that is what I would call social entrepreneurship, which is being an entrepreneur, but not only in the private sector, but being an entrepreneur who bridges government, civil society, and the business sector. The next point that I think should be taught is business ethics. Because, of course, we have a major crisis all over the world in business ethics. Look at the corruption scandal in Brazil, which implicates so much of the political class. In the United States, we have massive corruption in our political system as well. The U.S. has legalized a lot of this corruption, unfortunately. So the big companies pay money to the politicians for their campaigns, and then the politicians, of course, support their donors. And it's a very corrupt system. Much of it legal, most of it unethical, in my opinion, deeply unethical. And this is not only the U.S. and Brazil. Almost every place we look at the world, there are corruption scandals underway that absolutely involve the business sector, whether it's Wall Street or the construction industry or the oil and gas industry or other parts of the economy. And we have not properly trained, educated, prepared our students to stay out of these crises. So business ethics and business ethics for sustainable development, I believe, is extremely important. Let me mention that in a project that I carry out together with the Vatican, we recently brought philosophers, business experts, and theologians together from many religions, Catholicism, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, Muslim leaders to talk about proper behavior behavior of business. And we ended up with a list of 10 corporate commandments, 10 areas where business needs to do better. I won't read them all now, but they all involve business taking responsibility to stop doing damage to other stakeholders in society. It is not the role of business to make profits at any cost. It is the role of business to make profits that do not harm other parts of society. Making profits through pollution, through cheating, through fraud, through tax evasion, through carbon emissions are, in my view, unvalid forms of profitability. And the basic message for the corporate sector is that we need a true value added for businesses, not a value added that's based on causing harms in other sectors. So I believe that the Sustainable Development Agenda requires us not only to teach the technical aspects of sustainable development and the policy aspects, but also the ethical aspects of sustainable development. Finally, let me just say a word about the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. This is a worldwide network, like PRIME, that now has around 500 universities around the world that are committed to working together for the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure that some of the universities there are part of the SDSN network. I am happy to be the director of SDSN in my capacity as special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General. The idea of this network is to help universities to do a better job on teaching, research, outreach, incubation of new startup activities, all in the interest of sustainable development goals. We have national chapters of SDSN in about 25 countries around the world. Again, I'm sure that many of your countries have SDSN chapters. What I would like to propose in closing is that following your meeting and your brainstorming, that you would return to me for an exploration of how PRIME and SDSN can work together. It would be a great honor, but even more an incredible benefit for SDSN to work with the network of business schools around the world and the business community to help move forward the agenda. And I know that Secretary General Guterres would be very much appreciative of our efforts to join forces and see how we can cooperate. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this is relevant. I hope I've understood properly the purpose of your meeting. And I want to thank you for the chance to be with you this morning. And I look forward to hearing the results of your deliberations and to be working together with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Muito bem, professor Jeffrey Sachs, nosso muito obrigado, thank you. E neste momento damos continuidade presencialmente, convidando a palavra o elenco Grupo de Trabalho PRME anti-pobreza.
It's difficult to speak after Jeffrey Sachs. But I would like to share with you something from my heart. We, as an anti-poverty working group, in fact, the first working group within PRIME, are very happy to be among the organizers of this great event, and we are thankful to the organizers, people who come and posts in a city which has already achieved one of the objectives that Jeffrey Sachs mentioned, urban planning, transportation, and so on. As I mentioned, our working group was the first in PRIME, but there are many other things where
our working group was somehow first, including activities, events that were either organized in Latin America or in Brazil, or were implemented with the participation from people, our members from Latin America. Our working group has 183 members from 148 institutions in 54 countries, of which we have 19 members from 8 countries in Latin America. So more about working group activities you will hear during the event. I would like just to share with you 2 stories. In the last meeting a couple of days ago, also mentioned our Brazilian colleague Paulo César Mota, who during our activities on integrating poverty into management education said, poverty is only walking 5-minute walking distance from us. And we like it very much. But later on, working with Paulo and the colleagues, we discovered that poverty is not, in fact, 5 minutes walking distance from us. Poverty is with us, in our minds, in our hearts. When we launched the first 2 books on why and how to integrate poverty into management education, in our poll, we announced what kind of contributions we would like to receive. This aspect of poverty, that aspect, and so on. And then we received a letter from a Greek professor. And he said, you didn't mention in your poll that you welcome contributions on intellectual poverty. And we thought, well, this is what our books are supposed to be. So we said, yes, please feel welcome. And if the chapter is good, it will be either the first one for the book or the last one as a conclusion. And it was the last one. An excellent contribution. Now, why intellectual environments? We believe, as a working group, but also as one, as a whole, that what we have to do is to really create new agenda, new intellectual agenda, new research agenda, new educational agenda, and new institutional agenda. I admire the organizers of this conference for the intellectual and moral courage to give the general theme, to offer the general theme of this conference, new research questions. Because if we ask only for new answers to already existing research questions, we would not advance. Now we ask for new research questions. And I think there is a lot of intellectual courage. I would like to congratulate the Program Committee and particularly congratulate all the delegates, all the participants, with whom now I think RME research conferences this month has raised the bar, which would be difficult to match for the time. I wish you all the best in the conference, good luck, and I'm really privileged as well as our working group to be here with you. Thank you very much.
A palavra convidamos Cláudio Boixá.
Bom dia a todos. Quando eu estive lá no Cairo, como mencionou o elenco, mencionou o Cairo, o estalo que deu na cabeça foi, poxa, eu tive tantas oportunidades de convivência com pessoas tão sensíveis, sensacionais nas minhas andanças pelo mundo, que eu tenho tentado fazer com que nós, brasileiros, consigamos nos conectar, junto essa conexão, com pessoas tão especiais, e algumas delas estão aqui hoje no mundo exterior. É com muito prazer, portanto, que a gente chega nesse momento, depois de 2 anos de ideação e muito trabalho, especialmente depois que a aprovação obtida no PRME Brasil, numa sessão, uma reunião
ainda no ano passado, depois nós tivemos uma assunção das responsabilidades de organizar a temática com um trabalho de inteligência nas pessoas do Flávio, da Adriana, que são, assim, como verdadeiros anjos que caíram na organização desse evento. Não teria acontecido, evidentemente. E a adesão inicial de grande energia da Fiep foi um outro insumo fundamental desse trabalho. Né? Na pessoa da Priscila, agradeço e reconheço a competência e a sensibilidade de toda a sua equipe, né, de imediato. Quando falamos no tema voltado para os ODS, que é uma novidade na sequência dos eventos de pesquisa do PRME, o foco em ODS nos coloca diante de uma complexidade e de uma interconectividade que tem que ser melhor compreendida. Essa é uma missão da pesquisa. E nós esperamos que, quando falamos em energia, agricultura, cidades, por trás disso, por trás das metas colocadas em termos numéricos, existe uma grande complexidade para se fazer as ações interconectadas para que essas metas sejam alcançadas em 2030. Esperamos que a pesquisa nos apresente respostas no futuro para essa complexidade e necessidade de interconectar as diversas partes da sociedade. Outro objetivo é direcionar ações concretas nas diversas disciplinas. Não estamos falando somente de gestão ambiental, não estamos falando somente de gestão social, nós estamos falando da governança social humana, nós estamos falando da governança social, da governança também, por que não, da própria natureza. A nossa intervenção, a nossa presença na natureza precisa ser melhor compreendida. E as questões sociais, muito involucradas com as questões ambientais, podem apresentar respostas a questões que hoje são muito nebulosas. Ontem, numa das apresentações que o Norma referenciou agora há pouco, lá no evento do Israel, ressalta aquele rapaz que falou sobre o robô, sendo um robô virtual sendo utilizado na saúde, a interconexão entre tecnologia e a saúde. Esse tipo de atividade em que você tem ações concretas sendo realizadas deveriam ser um resultante das pesquisas e do conhecimento levantado por elas. Finalmente, está colocado aí na nossa programação, provocar a interação conjunta das partes. Não é só uma questão do pesquisador na sua mesa, mas como o pesquisador interage com os professores, interage com os estudantes, com a direção da escola, com a concepção de programas da escola, como levar isso para dentro das disciplinas. Fora da escola, como fazer com que essa educação alcance as empresas, para que a liderança das empresas reflita o outro conhecimento. Né? Indo mais além, como que as políticas públicas podem ser estimuladas e alimentadas pelos processos de pesquisa. A pesquisa não só sobre os temas, energia, agricultura e cidades, mas as pesquisas sobre as próprias políticas públicas. Como fazê-las? Como fazê-las funcionar? Como fazê-las dar o resultado que se espera delas? O nosso evento, ele tem aqui um verso do crachá de vocês, não sei se vocês perceberam, uma descrição mais genérica, mais geral do programa. Vocês verão que teremos algumas sessões aqui nesse ambiente, com palestras, nós temos mesas redondas. A sequência de temas foi imaginada de uma forma que nós percorramos desde o interior da escola, desde o interior do trabalho do pesquisador, até a questão das políticas públicas, percorrendo todo o trajeto da gestão do conhecimento. Essa é a ideia. Nós teremos sessões paralelas em determinados momentos, dedicadas a determinados temas, serão em salas que estão marcadas aqui no andar. Há uma sinalização que direciona para vocês o local que vocês devem dirigir de acordo com o número da sala. Por favor, prestem atenção a essa indicação, porque na parte da tarde nós começaremos, espero que mais ao final da manhã nós possamos oferecer aqui melhores informações sobre o retorno do pós-almoço, diretamente para as salas. Finalmente, teremos as sessões e a partir de 10h30 nós começaremos a primeira sessão. Por favor, prestem atenção, visitem, prestigiem lá os estudantes que fizeram a apresentação e estão lá dispostos a conversar com todos nós. Finalmente, então, relatar para vocês que está sendo feita uma cobertura ao vivo do evento. Essa cobertura está no Instagram, está no Facebook. Está sendo preparada pelo Jorge e pela Luciana, que estão trabalhando aqui com essa finalidade. Eu espero que... Eu tenho aqui os endereços, mas seria melhor que nós produzíssemos alguns cartazes, colocássemos aí no ambiente e que vocês pudessem se conectar dentro do evento. Era isso que eu tinha para informar vocês. Espero que tenhamos sucesso no nosso trabalho. Muito obrigado.
Nós vamos agora ouvir Jonas Hack, PRME Global.
Bom dia. When I was sitting here this morning, I was reminded of the very tall, too tall for my blanket. When I was sitting here on the panel this morning, I thought about an African proverb you might have heard about. When you want to go fast, go alone. When you want to go far, go together. I think the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals are the global agenda that help us go together to address the most critical issues that we're facing on this planet now and for the next years to come. So I think it is only timely we're coming together here with the crime research community to figure out answers to the question, and even more research questions, to the question, how can the academic sector, how can research help to support implementing and achieving Agenda 2030? We will hear more about this agenda and the very nature of it, but we've heard about it this morning, of course, by Jeffrey Sachs. I think it's just one sentence. It is a transformational agenda, and it requires, for its implementation, the participation by many sectors. And we've heard about this earlier this morning. The public sector, of course, is called on, but the private sector and the civil society sector, and to this I would also call the academic sector, is called upon to achieve Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. So I'm very happy that we're convening this research conference on this topic, and that you're all here contributing with your research and your thought leadership over the next couple of days. I'm here on behalf of the Prime Secretariat, which I have the privilege to lead out of the New York office, and many of you are part of the Prime Initiative, so I thought it would only be helpful maybe to make a few remarks about what the principles for responsible mental education is, and then go into just briefly what the research conference can hold, hopefully. So Prime, you might know, is by now, in its only 10 years of existence, has become the biggest global network for responsible management education. We count close to 700 academic institutions, business schools, Department of Business and Management, and universities in over 80 countries. Prime has, secondly, and that's important to note, turned into a network-based organization. So we are driven with the help of the UN, but the networks, the chapters, the working groups, some of the other groups connected to crime are helping to translate what crime means into the either local or issue-specific context. And that, I think, has given so much life over the last 10 years to crime to really grow into the global framework and the global benchmark for responsible management education. Research is one aspect of the 6 crime principles, and I think it's an important one. Why? Well, the crime, or the E in crime, stands for education, but all of you who are educators oftentimes also have a mandate or a requirement to do research. And I think research is, of course, in many cases, the basis for education. So it is not just an incentive for you as faculty members, as researchers, you have to do that, but it is also a means to translate your findings into responsible management education. Of course, it also gives you the opportunity through practical research to directly be in contact with stakeholders outside the university, mainly business hopefully, and help them on that path to sustainable development. So I think it is really great that we are seeing now the 4th iteration of the Responsible Management Education Conference. As Lutz said, it's the 4th time we've been reading this meeting, together with a number of you, and it has really become a benchmark for the Prime Initiative to focus on research and the connection to education. So I'm very happy that after 3 meetings, 2 of them in Europe, in 2 cities, and one in Egypt, that we are now coming into Curitiba. I think that's a trend, if I may say so, because it seems that all cities either start with a C or with a K. So maybe I give you a hint already what next year's city might sound like, but I won't give it away either. But it might start with a C or a K, depending which language you speak. So I look very much forward to the next couple of days, to your research, to your papers, to the many discussions we will have, to the learning, and to take away and to take back then to New York some of the findings. And certainly I will follow up on the call from Jeffrey Sachs we heard this morning to try to see how we connect the crime network with a very powerful network of SDSN so that we can drive forward the implementation of Agenda 2030 together with many important networks. Thank you very much for being here. I look forward to the conference.